The internet operated on a simple premise: information routes around obstacles. But today, nations are erecting invisible geographic borders inside the digital realm. This is the reality of data localization, a growing web of strict legal mandates requiring that digital information be physically stored and processed entirely within a specific country's borders. The Philippines offers a clear view into this regulatory shift. Driven by concerns over national security and data privacy, the state is increasingly pushing to keep its citizens' data strictly on sovereign soil. The government's primary mechanism is the Department of Information and Communications Technology's Cloud-First policy, which directly nudges state agencies toward local data center solutions. Looking at Section 12.2, subsection C of the amended Cloud-First policy circular, it restricts highly sensitive government data strictly to on-premise infrastructure within Philippine territory. By binding data to physical coordinates, these mandates create an immediate compliance burden for IT architects designing networks around geographical limits. It forces a severe operational dilemma. System architects must weigh strict legal compliance against the raw technical capability of the systems they deploy. The underlying assumption driving these policies is intuitive. If a government can physically guard the servers holding its data, that data must be more secure. But this directly opposes the architecture of the modern cloud, which relies on global hyperscalers providing infrastructure and platform as a service. Mapping both approaches side by side reveals a stark divergence. The sovereign model on the left traps data within a single jurisdiction, reliant on a localized power grid. On the right, the global network fragments and duplicates datasets across international zones, ensuring no single point of failure. Enforcing strict data localization for all workloads severely degrades a network's technical resilience and introduces massive economic friction. To understand why this geographic restriction makes data less safe, we have to stress test both models across three vectors: cybersecurity, against physical reliability, and economic impact. First, we need to examine cybersecurity posture. This chart illustrates the massive disparity in annual cybersecurity research and development. Global hyperscalers, who command over 60%, where engineer privileges are granted purely on an as-needed, strictly timed basis. These providers also utilize continuous, AI-driven anomaly detection and fully automated patch deployments, resolving vulnerabilities without any human intervention. Conversely, capital-constrained local data centers often rely on highly scrutinized but manual approval processes and smaller security teams, creating a slower response time to zero-day threats. Even government agencies pushing for localization implicitly recognize this deficit, often demanding that their local providers meet international defense standards. This Philippine Maritime Industry Authority procurement document makes it explicit. It requires the provider to hold ISO and SOC certifications, rigorous standards engineered by global tech giants. The document also demands high availability data replication, a level of redundancy local clouds struggle to afford. Billion-dollar automated defense networks define the ceiling of modern cybersecurity. At this scale, the physical coordinates of a server are irrelevant to its resistance to breach. The second vector is physical reliability and the risk of geographic concentration. Physical infrastructure in Southeast Asia sits squarely in zones prone to severe earthquakes, typhoons, and flooding. When a massive earthquake hit Tokyo in 2011, localized data centers sustained heavy physical damage and went offline, taking their clients down with them. Customers of hyperscale cloud services, however, remained operational. Similarly, in 2022, a fire at a single facility in South Korea caused millions of users to lose access to vital digital public services. Hyperscalers mitigate localized physical failures through active load balancing, instantly shifting compute workloads away from a failing grid to an operational one elsewhere globally. The ultimate test of physical concentration risk occurred in Ukraine during the 2022 Russian invasion. Facing absolute physical destruction, the Ukrainian government passed an emergency resolution to migrate sensitive state data to foreign servers. As their vice prime minister noted, missiles cannot destroy the cloud. When a local grid goes dark, a distributed architecture instantly spins up an identical workload thousands of miles away. An isolated sovereign cloud is a critical single point of failure. Against absolute physical destruction, Geo-redundancy is the only viable defense. The final vector is the economic impact of data localization on a nation's digital growth. Modern economic growth is increasingly tied to artificial intelligence, which demands massive, globally distributed compute clusters and vast datasets to train effectively. When stringent localization laws silo data, they cut domestic startups off from these highly efficient international AI resources. This flowchart illustrates a common market reaction known as regulatory arbitrage. When a startup is blocked by the high costs of a strict data jurisdiction, it routes its operations to a preferred jurisdiction that allows the free flow of data. Digital platforms will actively relocate their corporate headquarters to these preferred environments, simply to avoid the technical friction of siloed operations. While local governments try to stem this tide with special economic zone tax perks, these incentives rarely offset the high electricity costs and limited compute capacity of the local grid. The host country is left dealing with the downstream consequences, a steady drain of tax revenue, technical talent, and early-stage innovation to neighboring, less regulated states. By over-regulating data storage, a nation ultimately starves its own digital economy of the startups and platforms required to compete on a global scale. Does this mean there is absolutely no valid use case for strict local data residency? If we look at the Philippine data classification model, we find the specific, narrow justification. The tier labeled highly sensitive data covers official matter classified as top secret, including critical military, scientific, and cryptographic developments. For highly classified state secrets, the necessity for absolute legal and physical control by the government supersedes the need for technical resilience. But edge case state secrets are an incredibly small percentage of total data. Applying these same restrictions to e-commerce, public health records, or enterprise analytics degrades performance for no measurable security gain. This sorting diagram illustrates the optimal architectural balance. The vast majority of a nation's digital infrastructure flows into the global hyperscale network, while a tiny, highly secured trickle of critical state data is diverted into an isolated sovereign vault. This bifurcated approach satisfies the strict legal demands of compliance teams while maintaining the resilience required by IT architects. Military secrets demand sovereign borders, but a thriving commercial digital economy demands global scale. Treating geographic data localization as a blanket security strategy is a foundational architectural error. Prioritizing legal jurisdiction over technical reality leaves critical national infrastructure uniquely vulnerable to capital-intensive cyber threats and catastrophic physical disasters. To actually support AI innovation and robust digital platforms, nations must prioritize high-speed global connectivity over physical data hoarding. This is why Southeast Asian IT leaders are increasingly pushing for gigawatt-scale hyperscaler integration rather than settling for isolated local builds. Modern digital sovereignty is a product of high-level global integration. States that isolate their data behind physical walls forfeit technical resilience for a paper-thin sense of control.